So now we are ready to do sections 3 and 4. We will stitch section 3 first, and then section 3 will be stitched to section 4 while in the hoop. But the fabrics you will need will be some fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 5, and 6. You will also need, of course, your wash-away stabilizer pre-shrunk, and I've already got this in my hoop and I've already stitched step 1 on it. We will need a neutral thread and a wash-away thread, and again the neutral thread will be a different color than the wash-away so we can see it later on when we apply it to the block. This is where the sections will go in your block. This is section 2, I'm sorry, this is section 3 here and section 4. So let's get started. So step 2 is to place fabric 5 over this section of your block. I've already done my glue pen on there. And fabric 5 will go right side up, and it's cut so that there's about a 1/4 inch at the top and a 1/2 inch at the bottom. So that's the way we'd like you to place it on there, so that when it base it down, you have an extra 1/4 inch at the top, an extra 1/2 inch at the bottom, and about an extra 1/2 inch at the side. So that's why the glue is nice, because you can really get it to stick and check and make sure you're in the right place. So I will get all of these placed and we'll take them to the machine and continue with water-soluble thread to stitch them down. So I've used my water-soluble thread in step 2 to hold down my fabric 5. Now we're going to trim these, and we need to leave in this area here about a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this completes step 2. Now we're ready for step 3. So we're ready to start step 3. So we're going to take fabric 1, put it right side to fabric 6, using that same trick where you turn it back 45 degrees and line that fold up with your stitching line. So we'll place all of our fabrics. We'll put our neutral thread in the needle only and stitch the seam. I've just completed step 3, seaming fabric 1 to fabric 5, and I've trimmed away my excess seam allowance. So now I'll take a little glue pen, put it in the area where I want it to stick, and press over, finger press over my fabric 1 and stick it down to my stabilizer. So next step would be to put wash-away thread back in my needle and stitch the tack down. So we've completed our section 3, and we're going to refer to the instructions where it shows where to cut your 1/4 inch when you're trimming them. So the tops of them all get a 1/4 inch and the rest of the 3 sides get a 1/2 inch. So the way I like to mark it is just take a friction pen or a fabric marking pen and just make a little mark in the seam allowance where your 1/4 inch is going to be, and then the rest will be a 1/2 inch. So we'll take these out of the hoop and get them trimmed up, and then we'll start our section 4. So when trimming these, we've aligned them in your hoop so that you'll be able to trim all the way across on both of these two at the same time, and here as well. So the way I put my stabilizer in the hoop, I'm going to have a lot of excess at the end. So I like to cut that end off first and save it, and then I can zigzag the 2 pieces together and use it again to stitch another section. So this side gets a 1/2 inch. So I will trim that first, and now I have this big piece that I can sew to another piece and do another section. So I'll get these all trimmed and we'll come back and do section 4. So I've just stitched step 1 of section 4 onto my cutaway stabilizer, and as you can see, I did piece it right here. I just butted the edges together and zigzagged it with a matching thread, and the seam will end up through the middle of my section, but that's okay, you'll never see it in the end. So step 2 for section 4 is to take fabric 6 and place it over these middle sections right here. So I will outline that with my glue pen, and we're going to take fabric 6 right side up and place it over this section. I want to leave a 1/2 inch on the bottom and on the side. So I can kind of feel my stitching to see that I'm doing that. And I can peel it back and peek. So that's good. So we'll do that and we'll come back and stitch stitch step 2 with the water soluble thread to tack this down. So I just completed step 2 where I placed fabric 6 with the water soluble thread, and I've gone ahead and trimmed it. And just to show you where to trim it, we leave our 1/4 inch at the top, our 1/2 inch at the side and the bottom, because that's basically where we placed it. At this angled edge we trim to a 1/4 inch, and at this angled edge we can trim to a 1/2 inch. So now we're ready to go on to steps 3 and 4. For step 3, we're going to place fabric 2 to the top of fabric 6 with our raw edges even on all 4 pieces. And we will change to a neutral thread in the needle only and stitch the seam. So I just stitched my seam for step 3. So now we'll take our glue pen again and put it in this little triangle area. And then we'll fold up our fabric, nice tight seam, stick it down to the stabilizer. Don't forget to not leave any like lumps in there, get it nice and flat. And then we will switch back to our water soluble thread and go ahead and stitch the tack down. So here's our seam from step number 4. So now we're going to take a little bit of glue and put it in that corner triangle there, and we'll flip this fabric right side up and stick it down to the stabilizer, making sure we have a nice tight seam. We're going to change to water soluble thread in our needle again, and the machine will stitch a tack down around both of these areas. So I just finished step 5 with a water soluble thread tacked down these 2 little corners, and now I'm just going to go ahead and trim the bottom of these to about a 1/4 inch, because for step 6 that's where we do our match points to sew on section 3. So I'm going to make that about a 1/4 inch, and then I'll take it to the machine and show you how to do a match point to match this seam to this seam. I'm ready to do my match points, and as you can see, when I lower the needle goes exactly where that seam is. So this is the whole idea, is that we will take this section 3, put it right side to section 4, and because I used a darker thread in my needle to sew the seam, I can see that that's exactly where my needle needs to go, right where I see that little bit of dark thread there. So all I need to do is lower my needle right where that dark thread is, and then pick it up and let my machine stitch that little match point. And I'm using water soluble thread like I said. So what we'll do is just move the hoop forward and check the match point, and it looks really good. So we'll move on to the next one. So I just finished my match points, and we can check them all before we go ahead and do the last step. So they all match. So now for the last few steps, we need to place our neutral thread back in the needle, and we're going to go ahead and stitch the seam on each one of these units. So before stitching the seam, I like to drop the needle and make sure that it lands right there at that intersection, like the basting line from section 3. So it's landed right exactly in the right place. So then I can go ahead and stitch that seam. I like to stop it about halfway through And then just check the matching of the last part of the seam. Just turn back my fabric and make sure those two basting lines are aligned, and they are. So we'll go ahead and finish that part of the seam. And then we go ahead and do the next one. So we'll go and finish all 4 of these and come back and show you how they look when they're done. So all 4 of my seams are stitched, which is the last step. So now I can unhoop this and trim them, and I'll have 4 of my units ready for the blocks. So following my instructions, I'm going to go ahead and mark where I want the 1/4 inch seam. So it's on the angled edge of all of our sections, and the other 2 get a 1/2 inch. So I will go ahead with my fabric marking pen. I'm using a friction pen. I'm just going to make a little star there before I unhoop it. And then I will unhoop this and trim them up. So I went ahead and rotary cut my 2 sections apart. So I have 2 here and 2 here. I took it to the iron and I pressed this over so it's open. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim them. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch here and a 1/4 inch here. And I just turned over my trimmer by George to use the ruler side. And I'll do my 1/4 inch sides first. And then on each of them, I'll give these 2 edges a 1/2 inch trim. And this one, of course, has an extra little bit of stabilizer under there. I can go ahead and cut that off. So I'll get all my units trimmed up just like this. So here's a look at all 4 of our sections. This is section 3 and 4, and it's going to go on this block in the corner here. So we're ready to get started with section 5.